What are we going to cover? I'm going to do everything I know about exec interviews in 15 minutes. And hopefully that'll be something you guys can transfer to your day-to-day as well. So this is the normal slide that I use to show all the cool things I've done in my career, all these different jobs. What I usually don't tell people, though, is kind of all the damage that went into that. So I've done about 10 executive interviews over the last 5 years. I don't know if that's normal or not. You guys, I won't put you on the spot, but I've done about 10. Out of that, I had 3 offers, 2 super painful, embarrassing rejections where I was like, I shouldn't even be in technology, and then 2 accepts, right? So Reddit and CPO of Looker. So I've learned a lot doing this, I think. I've learned enough that I can put a presentation together and share it with you guys. That's where I'm at. So what I want to cover is the maybe top 4 things that you guys need to remember. And some of this I think will be transferable to your day-to-day, other interviews you might do, even if you're not in exec level. It's just good advice. So the first one. It's always been said, but you did not get executive jobs on LinkedIn. You actually don't really get any good jobs on LinkedIn. So I'm just telling you, I'm telling you for real. Once you get past a certain point in your career, you don't get good jobs off LinkedIn. And then don't go on Twitter and fucking complain about it. That's not how it works. Once you get into past staff or up, you need to be using your network. So the 3 biggest investments to expand your opportunity network, the simplest one is actually coworkers. So one of those jobs that the Reddit job I got was actually from a coworker that I worked with back in 2006. And people remember you for being a good coworker. They also remember you for being a bad coworker. So don't forget about that. Second, also really, really underutilized, something I wish to God I had started doing many years ago. It turns out Twitter is not a waste of time. It turns out if you put a little bit of energy into Twitter and a little bit of sharing your knowledge day to day, that compounds over time. And you will get extraordinarily good opportunities a year after starting to do that. So my social media following, I think I checked it this morning, I have not a huge following. I only have 2,900, I don't have a lot of followers relative to celebrities, but you will get a lot of inbounds that are very, very valuable if you just spend a little bit of time sharing your knowledge on social media. My favorite platform is blogging. Each of you learn something every week. I swear to God, just take 5 minutes, write a 200-word blog post about what you learned that week, post it up. It'll seem like nothing at the time, but you'll look back on it a year later and you'll be like, wow, why am I getting all these inbounds? And why? It adds up. So invest in your social media. And then finally, exec recruiters. I won't harp on it any more than you've already heard, but Sam and Bill here basically gave me access to all of my opportunities that I've had since I moved to the Bay Area. When I talk about networks, you can know 2 people that will change your life, and they're in this room. The reason I invited them here is because these are literally the 2 people that made me a multimillionaire sitting right next to you. That dude right behind you could make you filthy rich. Well, I know you're doing all right, man. He's trying to act like he's not loaded. Anyway, so second thing you got to do is establish your executive identity. All right. So when you go to get these jobs, it's it's something that I think Flea was trying to articulate. You're working with agents, right? You've got to kind of package up what you're selling, and that means you got to understand yourself. Exec interviews are not a time for self-discovery. You got to have all that shit wrapped up when you walk in the door, all right? So identity is the culmination of these 3 things. Experiences. The more breadth of experience you have, big companies, small companies, different technologies, the more attractive you're going to look as an executive target. Second, your reputation, all right? Your reputation, actually, let me drill into this a little bit. I think I've got a little expanded here. Experiences. There's a quantitative aspect to it, which is what I wanted to cover as well. So experience can come from the different breadth of types of companies you look for, but having done a lot of these, I've tried to bullet point the things I get asked about the most. If I go do an exec interview, I always get asked, the first thing is how many people have you ever managed? Then they'll ask, what's your opinion on coaching, mentoring, and people development? For those of you who are managers in the room, the reason that they ask that is because they actually want to know if you can fire people. It's the most weird thing. It took me like a couple tries to figure that out. Can you handle global offices? Another big one. It differentiates really experienced managers from people who are up and coming. Technical breadth, what technologies have you used? I think Flea covered like, hey, like maybe spent too much time on Azure or AWS. You want to have a breadth there. And then finally, partnering. So at a certain point in your career, your peers are no longer like other engineers. It's like, I spend almost all of my time with like the VP of sales and the VP of marketing. So when you describe yourself, like kind of keep these dimensions in mind, and how you answer, like people are gonna snap and make judgments on you, all right? So if you've never fired anyone and you say that, you will not get an exec job. I'll just tell you that right now. Manage, how many people you manage kind of tells you what stage startup you can be in. All of these things kind of tell the exec recruiter and the person on the hiring side where you should fit. Reputation is another important aspect for your identity. A surprising amount of that comes from your public persona. I have met people that have made like wild personal judgments on me based on things I've liked on Twitter. So I try and like things that match my personality. The second thing is reference checks will like not happen in a way that you can control. The valley's not that big. And people ask around, like, so people will go and ask your former coworkers, and it won't be in any formal channel. It's going to be all like back channel stuff. So try and leave good impressions with people that you work with. Don't leave sour grapes in any event, because you never know. Like I've been in tech long enough to know that you never know who's going to end up being your boss, right? It's like you're in tech long enough. Your relationships are what matter in the long run. And then finally, your system. So this is something that Nickel was getting at. I think he used the word framework. All right, so you guys, when you're being interviewed, you have to have a standardized approach that you're going to use and present to the person who's hiring you. So what problems are you good at solving? What is the repeatable framework with you use to solve those problems? And then finally, like, do you have stories to back that up? Ideally, those stories are from multiple companies and not just one example. Now, this is all kind of hard to fit in your head, but when you're interviewing, this is what they're actually asking about, right? So all of this gets kind of summarized and like packaged into a one-sentence pitch that like the exec recruiter or anyone will use to get your name out there. Here's my pitch. Nick Caldwell is a minority executive known for strong execution and innovation, experience with big companies and startups, can manage team sizes up to 500, successful exits. Like that's basically me in a nutshell when people are trying to sell me. So I can see the exec recruiters out here smiling. Like, probably been on the phone like saying that. So when you're doing an interview, they're not interviewing you as a person. You're not going to be doing like whiteboard exercises when you go to do an exec interview. That stuff stops like when you get about, I guess, staff level. If you're in any meeting like at staff level and up and someone asks you to do a whiteboard coding exercise, you just walk out of the room. It's not, it's not worth your time. Now, what they are interviewing you though, they're trying to figure out how your system's going to change their system. Does that make sense? Like they're hiring you because something was like, they couldn't find internally, like there was something missing in their company, and they're like, crap, we can't solve this problem, we gotta go external, we need somebody with a different system than the one that we got. So they already want to bring someone in external, so the question they're asking is, how is your system going to change their system, all right? So you have to be keeping that in your mind as you're doing the interview. That's why you think about these frameworks. The second thing you want to pay attention to, when you're doing these exec interviews, it's not like you're just gonna meet engineers, because you will realize later in your career, for those of you who are further on, the system is not just engineers. The system is sales, marketing, design. People will show up from these disciplines and they will want to interview because they want to know how their job is going to be impacted by your system. And I made this is one of the disastrous mistakes I made early on in my career. It's far enough back now that I can share it with you guys, but my very first exec interview was at Salesforce. I was going to be a VP of their search technology. I ended up placing their current VP of search technology, by the way, just to say that there's no hard feelings. But there's hard feelings. But I did go back and help them out. But my point is, during that interview, I wasn't aware of who was interviewing me. My background's at Microsoft. At Microsoft, we had just gotten rid of the test discipline. Like, I don't know if you guys have been around long enough. There used to be a very, very dedicated like software test discipline. At Microsoft, we had eliminated that. So I go to this VP of engineering job. Person walks in, starts asking my opinion on quality. and I start talking about like, hell, well, at Microsoft, we don't even have testers. We just make all of the engineers be developers. You know what that person's job was? Director of test. Director of test. And that was the first exec interview I've had where like, you ever do an interview so bad and they just walk you out? You don't even get to the end of it. Don't even get to the end of the day. So anyway, pay attention to who you're talking to and think about how your system is going to affect them. The faster you can figure out the company problem, the better your outcome will be. So they're interviewing your system. You need to be interviewing them to understand what problem they're trying to solve, all right? And I just wanted to leave you guys with 2 trick questions that I use to figure this out, because the sooner you can figure this out, the sooner you can kind of understand which framing that you should bring to bear. So what is the biggest challenge you deal with day to day? So every interviewer that you meet, make sure you ask them what challenges they deal with. 1, it makes you interested in it makes it seem like you're interested in the company and so forth. 2, they'll eventually slip up and tell you what the real problem is, like why they couldn't hire someone externally. And then second, just be straightforward. What's the most important expectation for this role? And try and push the conversation past the platitudes that usually come up when people ask you this. It's not like all about people development. It's not all these awesome things. It's like, no, what really are you trying to solve by hiring an external executive? And press on that a little bit, and hopefully you'll get the right answer. All right? And then finally, I numbered this wrong, but number 5, this is, I think, universally true. If you guys have ever heard of like the term imposter syndrome, there's this idea that like, even though you're good, you don't realize how good you are. All right, I actually think that's okay. It means that like, you're pushing out of your comfort zone. But there's an even worse problem that I think affects people of color disproportionately. And I call it just happy to be here syndrome. And I think this is the #1 thing that stops people of color and underrepresented minorities from moving ahead. And I certainly was victim of this, being at Microsoft for 15 years. And it's this idea. Like when I was trying to come up in tech, and I grew up in PG County, Maryland, my first job was at Microsoft. I was making $100,000 a year right out of the gate. This is 4 times more than my parents, like either of them. So I got into my mind like, shit, I can't lose this. And that resulted in me thinking, for many years, no matter what would be thrown at me, well, fuck, I'm just happy to be here because I'm making so much money. Working 14-hour days, no problem, just happy to be here. Asshole boss, not a big deal, just happy to be here. Opportunities sailing by me. Like, I grew up in a time when like Facebook and Google were coming up, but I was just happy to be at Microsoft, getting my six-figure check. The thing I'm trying to tell you guys, this held me back from millions of dollars. The problem that I had was I thought the risks were much greater than they were. And I didn't understand how great the rewards were. That is the fundamental problem with just happy to be here syndrome. Because when you get yourself that first 6-figure job, what you don't understand is that there is no ceiling in tech. There is literally, I am a CPO right now. I make a lot of money. Even I have no idea what the ceiling is. As far as I can tell, there is no limit. So you kind of have to get out of this mentality that like, I'm happy to have this money, or I don't want to take a risk because I might have to spend more time at work. Like, there's lots of different reasons that all add up to fear, and that fear is causing you not to realize your full potential. So don't be a victim to just happy to be here syndrome, and if you see someone who is, try and inspire them not to be. That's it. Thanks. Protect your dreams. Now I want to bring